Good afternoon and welcome to the final broadcast of ENG3E for Term 2A, brought to you by WASA Distance Education Center. So today's date is Thursday, April the 13th, and today's date marks class 34 of our 34 classes together. So yeah, this is the final class for ENG3E Term 2A, and we will continue our discussion on preparing to write the final exam. So after you complete all your coursework in ENG3E, that's units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you complete all of the culminating activities that are associated with each of those 4 units, then you have to arrange to write a final exam. And so the final exam has to be written, most commonly it's written in your learning center, and you will have your DEC or someone else who is qualified to do this. They will sit in the room with you, which is known as being a proctor or invigilating an exam. So they will sit with you. So you have to keep that in mind. That has to be arranged ahead of time. So today is all about getting you ready for that final exam. If we can't find someone to proctor your exam, if nobody can be arranged to sit with you while you write the final exam, then we will issue you what's known as a course culminating activity. So the difference there is that the final exam is a timed 2-hour test. Right, so as soon as you're given the exam, you have 2 hours to complete it. Once the 2 hours up, your proctor will gather the test results up, send them to me, I'll mark it, and then return to you a graded copy. And then we can calculate your final grade in the course. And if we can't do that, we'll send you a course culminating activity, which you'll complete over the course of a couple of days. So it's nice that you have more time to work on it, but it should take you longer than 2 hours, so it's a bit more work. But those are the 2 options that we have for you. All right, so once again, I want to keep up with some important dates. So we are in week 9 of Term 2A. So Term 2A will officially end tomorrow. And then Term 2B will begin on Monday, April 17th. So for myself, that means that I will stop teaching ENG3E and 4E as of this afternoon. Well, I won't stop teaching it, but I'll stop doing my broadcasts, and I will continue to mark papers from those courses. And starting next week, I will be teaching OLC 4O. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 1 p.m. So term 2B is, of course, our final term in this school year, and that means that graduation day is coming up at the end of next term. So don't want to spend too much time on it, but just want to mention that June 15th deadline coming up. So all of your coursework has to be submitted along with your final exam, right? So you have to have all the coursework submitted, and you have to complete your final exam before June 15th. And I believe maybe on June 15th at the very most. But you really don't want to push it that close. You don't want to be scheduling your final exam for the date of graduation, especially if you do intend to graduate. So you need to have these things figured out sooner than later. So if you're on pace to graduate and you only need 1 credit, then you should be reaching out to people now. Making a plan to have your coursework handed in as soon as possible. And I'll put up some contact information about that in a second. So if you go back and you look at my previous classes, which are all available on YouTube, we covered units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then week 9, we've spent 3 classes preparing students for the final exam. So you can go back, and if you have questions about any activities, any questions, any unit assignments, especially the big ones like the culminating activity, you can go back and review all of the classes. And we can also send you classes on a jump drive, so just keep that in mind, that if you have internet access that's not perfect, or it's spotty, or whatever the case may be, we can send you a jump drive and it'll have all of my classes on it, all 34. After today's class, I'll have them all archived and ready to go. So thank you for joining us. If you're listening to us live on 91.9 FM, broadcasting out of the studio in Sioux Lookout, Ontario, and then being shared with our communities up north, you can, or maybe you're listening on Bell Express View, channel 972. You can phone us at the local number, 1-807-737-4017, or phone the studio number at 1-800-465-7144. So keep that in mind. You can do this for all of your classes with WASA. If they are broadcasting, that term, you always have the option of phoning into the studio with a question. So even though today's our last class, I just want to remind you that, that is an option for you going forward. And then, of course, if you want to participate on the Zoom, you can do that with, I believe, all of the classes that we teach here at WASA. So that's an option too, that you can participate through Zoom, and you can kind of chat with the teacher and pose questions that way. And of course, go to YouTube, search for Laverty space WASA, and you will find my YouTube account. And once you're there, you will have access to all my videos that are arranged in convenient playlists. You can reach me directly through email. That's mlaverty@nnecschools.org. You can find me on Facebook Messenger by searching for my professional Facebook identity. That's Laverty WASA, Laverty space WASA. And you can phone the WASA office at 1-807-737-1488, or toll free at 1-800-667-3703. It's a good time to reach out to someone at the WASA office now. You can talk to a counselor. You can ask for me if you want to talk to me personally. But yeah, now's the time to think about your credits and how many you need to graduate, and thinking about how many you could realistically pull off in one term, right? So in 9-10 weeks, right? So there's enough time to finish a course, but probably not more than enough to cover two. And you got to just think about how much time that you have to work on your assignments, right? You need you need at least an hour a night to work on one course. So you're going to be looking at several hours a night. Oh my God! Excuse me. Could not mic my mic before the sneeze. My apologies on that one. Okay, so if you've been taking the course for about 8.5 weeks, you should be done all the assignments from Units 1 through 4, and almost done with the assignments from Unit 5, right? So that's 8.5 weeks of work in. You should have pretty much all of those unit works wrapped up and just ready to write that final exam, right? So if you look at it, it's about, should take you about a week and a bit to do an entire unit. So it goes by pretty fast. So that's why I think, you should probably take one chorus per term, or, one chorus per, maybe 4 throughout the course of a year, but 1 per term. So, well, you know you better than I do. So, but it all comes down to just being honest with yourself and just saying, can I devote the time to this? Can I make this happen? And that's why it's good to reach out and talk to somebody who can give you a hand. All right, so that brings us to today's lesson. We will look at an article from the Globe and Mail. This First Nation elder created a healing center in her backyard. So we're going to have a look at that article. And if we have time, we're going to look at those paragraphs again. So I'll pull up another editing paragraph, looking for misspelled words, grammatical mistakes, and other issues. So you're going to take notes as we do a close reading of a news article. And just like yesterday, we're practicing those that valuable reading skill, right, of analyzing a text. And then we're not going to do too much writing today, but I'm gonna pose some questions to you that you might be asked on the final exam. And so I wanna pose a question to you, and then maybe think of some strategies for how you would answer it. So we're gonna practice our reading skills and practice our writing skills. And time permitting, we will also practice our editing skills. Our fine tuning. We're gonna look at some of those paragraphs, but I do want to devote most of our time to that article. So you will hopefully, this is your success criteria. You'll know you've been successful if you can create your own strategy in anticipation of taking the final exam. So I would like all of you to develop some kind of a strategy for writing your final exam. That's what today is all about. You've just got a checklist, right, to do, right? So just, go into that exam, having watched all of my classes, having gone over your assignments to see what worked, what didn't. You can, and that's how you would study for this course, right? I would study your assignments themselves and look at the feedback you receive from your teacher, see what you're doing well, see what you have to work on. You can practice your skills by reading articles and practicing them, and looking at the material in your textbook. Having a look at some of the readings from the anthology that weren't assigned to you, but you could look at and practice with. And then practicing your skills, and just having a mental game plan to stay focused and calm during the test, which I think is really critical and something that wasn't really taught to me when I was a younger man, taking my university education. I think it's really important to go in there with a positive mindset and just get yourself grounded and just take a survey of the entire exam booklet, right? So just you're giving yourself instructions before you go in and you write this test, right? So you're going in with a game plan. So before we look at this article, I want to put up some kind of sample writing prompts, right? And so that is usually what's going to happen on this final exam, and most final exams for high school English, is you'll be asked to produce some writing, but it's not just going to be like write a paragraph, right? It's going to be much more helpful than that, much more detailed. So you're either going to be given an opinion to talk about, or you'll be given a statement, for example, and the statement will say, like, global warming is the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Do you disagree or not? Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? Right? So you'll read a statement, and then you'll have to agree with it or disagree with it, and then explain yourself through like a short essay. Or you'll be asked to read a selection, like an article, like we're going to read together now, and then you'll be asked to do a writing prompt that's based off of that article. So writing prompts, and this one's going to be, summarize the journey taken by this elder. So it's about an elder. We're going to learn more about her momentarily. So that could be a writing prompt. You could summarize the journey taken by the elder. You could be asked to, how does her life compare with yours? Do you, I'm going to say, do you share anything? What's different? So these could be some kind of questions you might get asked, especially if you think about the whole theme of this unit, right? The the whole idea behind ENG3E is the journey, right? So we got to think about the journey she took. You know, how does her life compare with yours? Do you share anything? You know, what's different? You know, do you think her healing lodge will help people? So why or why not? So as I mentioned yesterday, you'll be given a passage to read, so either like an entire article or like several paragraphs from a longer piece. You'll be asked to read it, and then you'll be asked to answer some questions about it or write about it, right? So in this scenario, we're doing a practice run, and let's say, you know, you've been given the final exam, you've done some deep breaths, slow deep breaths in, slow exhale, you've calmed yourself down, you've told yourself you can do this. Then you flip through the exam booklet, taking note of how many questions are being asked, how many parts are you responsible to answer, how much time do you have, what's the weights on the grades. And by weights we mean, like, you know, are they all worth 20 marks? Is one worth 15 and the other ones are worth 30, right? So you have to decide, you know, are they all equal? Is one going to take me longer than the others? And just sort of map it out. How much time do you have? And then I would really suggest that you start with one that really kind of grabs you, right? Just the one that you think you can start doing right now, and you have stuff to say, and just pick the one you think is going to work the best, and that's really going to be beneficial to you, right? It's going to build your confidence. It's going to keep you rolling, right? So let's say you read this. Oh, it's a writing prompt, and it's about an elder who has a healing lodge. I like that. I'm going to read that article. But before I read the article, I'm going to review the questions. And the questions are, number one, well, they're not really questions, but they're writing prompts. Number one is summarize the journey taken by this elder. Number two, how does her life compare with yours? Do you share anything? What's different? Number three, do you think her healing lodge will help people? Why or why not? So let's keep those three ideas and prompts in our minds as we read this article together. All right, so just let me find that. Just going to save my work before I go on to the next thing. File, open. Okay, here we go. All right, so this Globe and Mail article was published on January 14th, 2023. And it was published by Willow Fiddler. And the title of the article is This First Nation Elder Created a Healing Center in Her Backyard. So it's not really a lodge, it's a healing center. And it's in her backyard. And there's a lovely photograph of the elder, and the caption reads, Elder Rita Fenton from Fort William First Nation runs a private counseling practice from her home that she has turned into the healing place. It includes a 26-foot teepee recently erected in her backyard, underneath the majestic Anemki Waji, or Mount McKay. Photo by Willow Fiddler in the Globe and Mail. So this is maybe we'll do what we did yesterday and just kind of. This one's got very short paragraphs, but I'm just gonna write them down as we go along. The day after the November 5th grand opening of a 26-foot teepee in Rita Fenton's backyard in Fort William First Nation, a family of 8 showed up to her door looking to have a sacred fire for family members who had recently passed. "There's wood there, there's chairs inside," she told them. "Just have the fire and stay as long as you want." The teepee is the latest addition to Miss Fenton's house located south of Thunder Bay, which the elder calls the healing place, and which is a literal dream come true. She described it in her dream journal 10 years ago. It says, "I'm living in this big house. A lot of people are coming to it, and it's called the healing place," she said from her home, which sits below the majestic Anemki-Waji, the Anishinaabe name for Mount McKay. When she bought the house in 2009, Miss Fenton said it was run down with holes punched in the walls. She spent months cleaning it up. "I turned it into a healing place," she said, describing how she replaced one of the bedroom windows with a sliding door that opens to a deck overlooking Anemki-Waji's peak. "It's very sacred and it's powerful, and it's strong because it's rock, the grandfather and our ancestors," she said. "There's many teachings and many stories about Anemki-Waji, and to have it in my backyard, it's just like I'm blessed. Creator brought me here. In that room, for the last 3 years, she has run her private counseling practice after she relocated from downtown Thunder Bay." And then there's some amazing photographs in this article. So there's another great shot. This is the inside of this 26-foot teepee. So it's got a nice kind of beautiful metal fire pit, some chairs. Rita in the caption reads, "Rita Fenton sits inside the teepee, where individuals and families are welcome to hold sacred fires or just sit in a safe place for grief and loss. She also hosts full moon ceremonies here." Now let's see, what were we on? Paragraph 7. Miss Fenton ordered the healing place's new teepee from the United States, and its $10,000 price tag was paid for through donations. Her nephew Doug Little painted it with images of an eagle, a turtle, a man, and a woman wearing a rainbow ribbon skirt. Mrs. Fenton hopes the healing place will be permanent and accessible at all times. She's working on getting a website up to book use of the teepee and secure funds to keep the fire going and offer more traditional teachings with elders and other knowledge keepers. In the meantime, she plans to use it for the full moon ceremony she's hosted for the last 20 years. Instead of cramming up to 30 women in her living room, so I make sure I had the paragraph numbers right. So instead of cramming up to 30 women in her living room, they will gather around the orange glow of the fire that lights the teepee under the night sky. With a master's degree in social work, earned in 2017 when she was 69 years old, which is pretty amazing, and as a survivor of Indian Day School, in her counseling, Miss Fenton provides mental health support for survivors of residential schools, as well as those suffering from trauma, grief, and loss. She traveled to Edmonton this past summer to support residential school survivors during the papal visit, which is, of course, when the Pope was in Canada. She is quoted as saying, "It's always been a part of my life because I watched my parents, how they were always helping people," she said. Miss Fenton said her own journey of health and wellness began after hitting rock bottom as a young mother with addictions. Finding strength in her Anishinaabe spirit name, Eagle Woman, she started to learn about her own history and how to follow the traditional role of living a good life called the Red Road in her culture. Going back to university as a mature student also opened doors. And there's a lovely image of Rita Fenton sitting outside of her teepee, and she's clearing snow off of it. A lot of uncovering of my mind, decolonizing my mind from Christianity, from colonization. She said, learning about our history to a deeper level and looking at and seeing how resilient my ancestors were and how strong they were and the stuff that they must have gone through and lived through. It was a lot of healing, inner healing. With the rise in addictions, mental health crises, and family violence during the pandemic, Ms. Fenton believes it's more important than ever to have support systems in place for those affected. The rates of accidental opioid overdoses in Northern Ontario over the last few years were almost 3 times higher than southern regions of the province. According to a report co-authored by the Ontario Drug Policy Research Network, ICES, the Office of the Chief Coroner for Ontario, and Public Health Ontario. Another report, released in November by the Chiefs of Ontario and the Ontario Drug Policy Research Network, found the illicit overdose death rate for Indigenous peoples doubled during the first year of the pandemic. There were 116 Indigenous opioid poisoning deaths between March 2020 and March 2021, a 132% increase from the previous year, while the rest of Ontario's population saw a 68% increase. While there are other teepees in the city, they're often not easily accessible or are only available at limited times. Miss Fenton said, she hopes that hers can be a place of healing for all those who could use help. I saw the need a long time ago, she said, the need for people to have a place to come to just sit if they want, to sit in there and just be. So that is the article. It's it's a news report that appeared in the Globe and Mail. So we can go back to our discussion yesterday and just think about the ways that we can analyze the content of the report, right? So just how it's written, who it was written for, what the formatting of it, the context of it. It's published in very short paragraphs. So, and that's very common these days. I think, especially when newspaper articles moved into an online, and people began reading newspaper articles on their phone or on a screen. They tended to use shorter paragraphs, but it does help to break up the writing. And so you do have some longer paragraphs, but most of them are only 1 or 2 sentences long. They're just very short, kind of clipped, not clipped, but they're very short and lean, just kind of like 1 to 2 paragraph. 1 to 3, sentence paragraphs, right? So that's kind of one piece of kind of older-fashioned advice that we used to give students all the time, is that a paragraph should be 5 sentences or 3 to 5, but like sometimes a paragraph is just 1 very powerful sentence, right? Or 2 just very short and punchy sentences. So I'm just gonna open up my other slide deck here, and then we'll just kind of go back to some of the notes we were making, right? So we had these questions, these writing prompts, but before we do that, I just want to just sort of size this article up, just make sure we understand it. And this helps when you write, right? So be aware of the format. So it's a news report, which means that it's non-fiction. And I would say its organization. It was 19 short paragraphs. There were 3 photographs, right? And you can talk about those photographs in your response too, right? So if you're given an article and, and that might be one of the questions too, right? It might be like, how do the photographs change how you interpret the story, or how does it add to the story, right? How does it, what information do you get from the photographs that you don't get from just reading the text? So it's a news report. It's nonfiction. That's how it's organized. What else can we say about it? You've got your main characters. It's also, I would just make some notes. It's there are many quotes from Rita Fenton. There are descriptions of, quote, the healing place. So that's, that's her home, right? That's, I would say, Miss Fenton's home, right? So it's we have, I mean, especially at the end of it, we have stats about addictions / healing. And what else do we have? So we have many quotes from Rita Fenton. We have descriptions of the healing place. We have we have details about her life. So we have details about Miss Fenton's life. All right, so that's good. So I mean, and even if you don't jot all that down, but I think you should, as long as you have that information sort of available to yourself, and just kind of put this work in a little bit of context. And if we're looking for answers to these questions, this is basically how the article is broken down, right? You get many quotes from the subject of the article, Rita Fenton. It's a description of the healing place and her home. We get stats about addictions and mental health. And so I would say the purpose of this article is to inform. It's an information article, right? So it's to inform us about this healing lodge, to tell us about the healing place. I think first and foremost, that's what it's about, right? It's to let readers know about the healing place, to know what happens there and how you can access it, that kind of thing, right? So that helps us to put this work in context. Now we need to maybe spend some time on these questions that you you could potentially get on a question like this. So so if you're asked to summarize the journey taken by this elder, you would have to just jot down, the order in which her journey takes place, right? So you have her most recent journey, and then I guess it all depends on how you kind of define the word journey, right? So are we talking about the journey of her entire life? Are we talking about her journey to build this lodge, right? So you could just talk about that, right? So So you could say, you know, the journey to build this lodge began, you know, you know, she said 10 years prior she had that dream, which she very wisely wrote down in a dream journal, and then she took that inspiration and then eventually founded the lodge. So, you know, when you're summarizing it, you're just simply just you can quote the text directly, you can put quotation marks around things, but you know, just put it into your own words. And you know, when you do something like that, when you provide a summary, you know, you need what's called like talking points, right? So you do a point form thing, like you say, she has the dream, she has the dream about it, you know, she gets funding, the donation, sets up TP, you know, down here, you know, plans to promote it. She, you know, she welcomes people to use it. So that's what I would do. Just yeah, try to get like 5 points that you could bring up, 5 talking points, and then you turn all of them into sentences. And when we're doing this, then we are practicing the 5-step writing process, right? So, and I think that's going to be really beneficial for students to do. Even, you know, and it might seem like it's not the best use of your time, and I would strongly encourage you to avoid, you know, avoiding a feeling like that you don't have the time to do this, because it will help you produce better writing. It'll help to focus your thoughts. So you create an outline for yourself, a very brief roadmap, right? I'm going to talk about this point, that point, that point, this point, then that point, right? And so you just jot down your talking points, you jot down your point form, just, you know, and you could even sometimes I do this, like I'll say like I'm going to write a sentence about this, a sentence about that. And that's all you do. Once you have them all in front of you, then you just start writing them. Okay, I need to write a sentence about that. Okay. Write a sentence about this. Okay, got it, right? So just that's what I would suggest to you in that situation, right? So create yourself an outline and then go ahead and start writing it. And, you know, a very important consideration would be, you know, you're not going to have too much time for editing and revising and moving things around, especially if you're writing with a pen and a pad. But, you know, you may have time to fix some of your mistakes. But I would put some extra time into the planning and the outlining phase, and I think it'll pay off. It'll help you get a good grade. Okay, how does her life compare with yours? Do you share anything? What's different, right? So, and then for a question like that, I would just, you know, don't think that there's nothing too obvious. You know, talk about your age, talk about your gender, talk about your culture, right? Talk about your experience with going to a healing place. Talk about your experiences with ceremony. You know, is there anything in her life that you can identify with, right? Any kind of, you know, anything that you can relate to and you can put into your writing, right? So just, and for a question like this, you know, I will once again bring up my 2 favorite words, and my favorite advice to student is to be specific. Be specific and focus your writing, right? So again, you don't really have a lot of time. It's a 2-hour timed exam, so you want to make sure that you're focusing on details. And so, if you think you've got a connection with this woman and there's like one or two things that you have in common, or maybe there's one or two key differences, I would focus on one or two. Either pick two similarities, two differences, or one similarity and one difference, and I wouldn't go beyond that. And then just write about them in detail. And that's really what produces strong writing is you bring up a main idea and then you elaborate on it. You add details. You come at it from a few different angles, right? You give examples. You describe a scene. You describe a person from your life, a time in your life, talk about something you went through, something you did, a place you visited, right? So be really specific and just talk about that. Reading this article reminded me of the time me and my brother did this, right? Do you think her healing lodge will help people? Why or why not? Okay, so yeah, similar, right? So just decide whether you think it will or it won't, and then give your argument, right? And then you're gonna have to make a statement, and then back it up with some facts and some things that you can pull off of the article, right? So just simply make your case and argue why you are right or wrong. Or no, don't argue why you're wrong, but argue why you are right. So practice some of those tips of persuasive writing. Start with your strongest argument and work yourself down from there. You need and again, maybe if you can think of one good reason why you think this healing place is going to work, talk about that one reason, but just elaborate on it and work it a few different ways. Okay, so that's what I would suggest that you do. Just really limit yourself to one or two ideas that you can talk about through several examples and details, right? So, and that's really going to help you focus your writing. All right, so I think that's about all I can say about that for now. We've got a little bit of time left, so yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I can say about that article. It's also what we call a human interest story. It is it is about this healing place, but it's also about the woman who created it, right? So it's like and that's I guess that's sort of like right there in the title, right? So that's an important argument, right? You could make, right? So is this article about the healing place or is it about Miss Fenton, right? Of course, it's about both on a technical level, but what is it on a deeper level? What is this article really about? What are they, what are they really, getting at here? What is Willow Fiddler's main, what is her main message? What is she trying to get across? Okay, so with that in mind, we'll pull up another one of these editing paragraphs. So again, this is from EnglishForEveryone.org. So it's a website that I've just recently discovered. Lots of great resources for teachers, but also great resources for students. Okay. Now, one of the things that I've talked about in this class is the benefit of reading your work out loud and reading the work of other people out loud, right? So when you read it out loud, so if you're writing an exam and there's lots of people around, or maybe it's just you and the proctor, and you're too shy to read out loud, which I get, I'm like that too. You can just simply read it in your mind, and I mentioned this yesterday. There's really, you can read stuff in your head, and just read it for speed. And when you're skimming and scanning and just rushing through something, you just sort of read it and you get the meaning, but you go very quickly. Or you can deliberately read it out loud in your mind and hear every word. Okay? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to train your brain and train your eyes to look at the word as you say it. And as you look at the words and as you hear the words, you should pick up mistakes and you should pick up ways you can improve the writing. So we have this paragraph which has mistakes written in it on purpose, and the point of this article is to, or this exercise is to read it and to fix it. Just one moment, please. Okay, my apologies. I had a very important phone call there. But all right, so I'm just going to read this paragraph, and then we'll go through it together. So, when I turned the doorknob, it opened easy. I was immediately suspicious. The door should have been locked on a weekend at midnight. I was carefully pushed the door open. It was pitch black inside. I couldn't even see my own hand on the doorknob. I heard a low growl and felt something brushed past me. What was it? A tiger? A lion? A wild beast? There he is, said Mr. O'Malley, owner of the building. Come on, Butchie, he called to the dog. Time to go home. Mr. O'Malley looked at me for a moment. Then he said, I know. I shouldn't have left the door open. I came back to lock it and to find Butchie. All right, so let's go to that first one. So when I opened the doorknob, it opened easily. So this is our subject verb agreement. So when I turned the doorknob, it opened. It should say it opened. It opened easily. Okay, so there's actually a lot going on there, right? So the doorknob, it's written in the past tense, right? So when I turn the doorknob is written in the past tense, so the verb should also be in the past tense. So when I open the doorknob, it opened, and you wouldn't say it opened easy, you would say it opened easily, okay? Because easily is an adverb that describes how something happened. So it opened easily. The word easy is an adjective, right? So that test is easy, right? So the word easy is an adjective that describes a thing. Easily is an adverb that describes how something is done. I was immediately suspicious. So I think they meant to say suspicious, right? And then we have many kind of misspellings of the word suspicious, but the correct one is B, S-U-S-P-I-C-I-O-U-S. And this there's no shame in this. I mean, a lot of times what happens is people are only familiar with a word and they've only heard it. They've only heard someone else use it, or they've only heard it on a TV show or a movie. And when they go to write it, they kind of write it phonetically, or they write it to the best of their knowledge. But in this case, it should be written as B. Number 3. The door should have been locked. Okay, so that's probably one of the most common errors, right? So using of instead of have. The door should have been locked, right? Not should have been locked, or should been locked, or should be a locked. Nope, should be a. Should have been locked. Number 4. I was carefully pushed the door open. I carefully pushed. I was careful and pushed. I was careful and pushed the door open. I did carefully. I would say C is grammatically correct. You could say I was careful and pushed the door open, but B is the better option because it uses 2 words instead of 4. So I carefully pushed, right? And again, carefully is another adverb that describes how something was done. It describes the verb pushed. It lets us know how they pushed. They pushed carefully. I heard a low growl and felt something brushed past me. So that should be brush past me. Yeah, so I felt something brush past me. If it was, I heard if it said, I felt something as it brushed past me, that would be okay. But the way this is phrased, it should say a brush past me. There he is, said Mr. O'Malley. There he is. Right, so it should be there he is, comma, up, and then quotation mark, said Mr. O'Malley. So so C is the correct usage, right? So when we quote someone and when we put what they say in quotation marks, we put the punctuation on the inside of the quotation marks, right? So if the so the full thing he said was there he is. So you go there he is, comma, quotation mark, said Mr. O'Malley, owner of the building. If the quote from the person ends with a period, then you put the period and then the quotation mark. Then he said, I know, I shouldn't have let the door open. So 7, he said, then he said, so it should be said, comma, then the quotation mark, and then what he actually said. And so everything he said is going to be inside the quotation mark, but we need the comma to set it up. And his last sentence, I shouldn't had left the door open. Right? And that's another subject-verb agreement. I shouldn't have left the door open. I came back to lock it. Yeah, and so that can get a little bit tricky, and it just goes to show you got to pay really close attention to how you use tenses, and it can get confusing when you're telling a story in the past tense, but the people talking in the story, like the dialogue in the story, is going to be written in the present tense, right? Right. So they're not going to say, I was looking for my dog. You wouldn't say that in the real moment. You would say, I am looking for my dog, right? So that's kind of where that takes a bit of thinking, right? So what they're saying is going to be usually spoken in the present tense, but the whole thing is written in the past tense because you're talking about something that's already happened. And so writing often comes down to consistency, and you got to be consistent with your tense and making sure your verbs match up with your subject and it all matches up with the tense. And as long as you're consistent from start to finish, that's the really important part, right? So that's all the time that we have for today. I appreciate you tuning in or checking out these videos on YouTube. If you need any other additional help with this course, please reach out to me. I'm available to help and will be until the end of the school year. So good luck with completing your assignments and your final exam. And I look forward to hearing from you and seeing your work. Thank you.